One thing that most Star Wars fans can agree on is the fact that The Clone Wars is simply a better piece of cinema than Rebels. There's just something about the epic adventures of these legendary heroes that intrigues fans of all ages, from the target audiences to 40-year-old losers living in their mom's basements. And yet, I've not met one human being with more than 2 brain cells who adores the TV show Star Wars Rebels. Oh sure, it's not a bad show, and hey, at least it didn't destroy any legendary characters, unlike some Disney products that I can name. But it just doesn't generate the same amount of hype and excitement that Clone Wars does. And today, I've decided to find out why. I mean, when everyone's favorite moment from a show is the duel between 2 characters from another show, you know you done messed up. So abandon your tic-tac-toe games, ignore bad cinematography, and let's get into it. The first point I want to make is that Clone Wars has a huge advantage. People already love the characters that the show centers around. For example, if I really like Obi-Wan Kenobi from the movies, and believe me, I do, then it's only natural that I want to see more of his adventures. And where better to find that than a canon TV show where he's one of the main characters. Now compare that to Rebels. I have no idea who any of the characters are, and honestly, none of them seem anywhere near as cool as the Jedi and clones that Clone Wars focuses on. The problem with creating a show set in an already existing universe and making completely new characters is that people just generally won't have the same level of interest. And that leads me right into another point. People didn't really care about what happened in the period of time when Rebels was set. With the Clone Wars, people were interested in what the Jedi were like when they were at the height of their power. The details of what happened between the second and third movies were more mysterious than Rey's lack of character development. So there was already an audience who wanted to know more about the timing. But for Rebels, people just weren't inherently interested in the early stages of the Rebel Alliance. Also, if you really think about it, Rebels didn't really add anything to the overall Star Wars universe as a whole. Clone Wars provided character development for Anakin and let us track his turn to the dark side. And it introduced characters like Ahsoka, who eventually became part of the larger Star Wars story by helping Luke try to rebuild the Jedi Order, and now is getting her own show, which they better not freaking mess up like they messed up Kenobi. Now look at Rebels. None of the characters that the show introduced came back in any significant way in the greater universe, and honestly, one of the most valuable things that it does is address how Ahsoka and Vader reacted when they found out that each other were alive, and I guess finally spelling the end for Darth Maul. To be fair, there's a very good chance that I could be missing some huge thing that Rebels added to the Star Wars universe as a whole, so let me know in the comments if you remember something I don't. But all in all, Clone Wars seems like a valuable addition to the Skywalker story that moves the prequels along, while Rebels feels like a pointless side story. It's fun, but in the end, it doesn't really add anything. By the way, if you're enjoying so far, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. Thanks, and now on to my next point. Clone Wars very quickly turned away from its intended kid-friendly nature. The writers realized early on that the show was attracting a much wider audience than originally intended, so the first season alone moved toward darker themes such as sacrifice, human shields, civilian casualties, and executing prisoners. Clone Wars embraced the darkness and evil of war and portrayed it as the horrible, earth-shattering bloodbath that it is. Rebels never really went in that direction. The first few seasons stayed very much lighthearted, and even when the show got slightly more mature, it didn't really have too much of a switch. A large part of this was Disney getting its greasy paws all over it. Writing for Disney is notoriously controlling, and writers are usually forced to stay within a box smaller than Kathleen Kennedy's brain, which, believe me, is a very small box. With Clone Wars, the writers had very loose creative freedom, which allowed them to do whatever they wanted with the show. This is what made some of the coolest villains in Clone Wars even possible. For example, Darth Maul was long considered to have been killed in The Phantom Menace, but Dave Filoni and his team went out on a limb and decided to bring him back from the dead, sparking the Maul Savage story arc and giving us some of the coolest villains in the entire show. Compare that to Rebels, where the villains are essentially some weaker Sith Lords and some random agent, and Rebels does have some cool villains, like Commander Thrawn and Darth Vader, but compared to the variety of Clone Wars with its bounty hunters, Sith Lords, crime bosses, pirates, and dozens more unique villains, there's just no way that Rebels could ever hold a candle to it. And I think that this is one of the key things that separates Rebels from Clone Wars. The writers for Clone Wars could take risks and do unexpected things that might pay off or might not. And while some certainly didn't pay off, like the 5-episode miniseries of R2-D2 and his droid friends having an adventure, some were really stories for the ages, such as the plot to assassinate the Chancellor or the Siege of Mandalore. When you really get down to it, fortune favors the bold, and Clone Wars had the freedom to be bold, while Disney gave its writers less room than an elephant on a dinghy. Although to Disney's credit, the characters in Rebels are actually pretty well written, unlike this wonderful Mary Sue.
Rey Skywalker.
To know why Ahsoka Tano is absolutely beloved by fans and Rey is so hated, you just have to check out this video right here.